Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Burn Fat and Feast podcast. I'm Sarah, your host. Today, I am interviewing Jennifer House, who is so far away from me in the world. I feel like we were just talking before we went and started recording this episode, and I was asking her how the weather was where she is because she's in Canada and I'm not. I am in Nashville, and so I'm cold just thinking about where she is right now as we record in January. But I'm so excited to have her on the show today. We are talking about making peace at the dinner table. We're talking about the importance of family meals. We're going to dive into some picky eating, uh, the whole subject of picky eating, what it means to be a picky eater. And so if you are listening and you struggle with this, you have children who are picky eaters, or you just feel like dinner can be a battle, listen up. This is going to be so incredibly valuable. But Jennifer, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Great. Thanks for having me, Sarah. I'm excited to chat all about this today.
Yeah, so excited to talk with you. Okay, so before we dive in, I know you're a wealth of knowledge on all things eating. Uh, Tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Sure. So my name is Jennifer, and I am the mom of three and from Calgary, the current frozen north, as you mentioned, in Canada. And I've been working as a registered dietitian in private practice with First Step Nutrition now for about 15 years. And I specialize in starting solids, picky eaters. So I just want to help decrease those dinner time battles. And I truly believe that, our goal of raising these happy, well-nourished little eaters who have that healthy relationship with food, it doesn't have to be such a fight that it often ends up being. And as we were chatting earlier too, I just love working with families because if I can get the parents to perhaps raise their kids in a different way around food than often many of us were raised, it'll just serve that child throughout their whole life. They'll grow up with a much healthier, more relaxed relationship with food and their body than many of us unfortunately have.
100%. I could not agree more. We were talking before we recorded too about that I work with the adults of these children, and so many times I hear from them that they did not grow up in a house that talked about food or talked about how food is fuel for your body or anything at all. And so many women who are coming to me for help in the menopause years are starting from scratch and don't necessarily know what is quote unquote good to eat versus better to eat, and what those nutrients are doing actually in our body. And so I love teaching our women that, but if we have that power to teach our kids, that's a generational effect. And how amazing is that? If we can raise kids who understand the importance of eating and eating well and loving the meal times versus having them be a battle. So this is so intertwined and, like I said, generational. And it just gives me so much pleasure. So Jennifer, let's kind of start with the dinner table and how it can be such a battle. And can you kind of walk us through what this looks like, or maybe why it is kind of this battleground?
Yeah, well, for many families, often it's the mom putting in all the effort to make the meal plan, prepare the food, put it on the table, and then their kid gets to the table and they go, yuck, I
Mm.
don't want to eat this, gross. So, that's offensive. And of course, we want our children to eat these nutrients to grow to their potential. So that's when the fight starts. The kid says no, the parent says yes, you have to try a bite, or you have to finish your vegetables before you get dessert, or clean your plate, or whatever it may be. And I think that's one of the big mistakes that parents make is pushing their child to eat and pressuring them, whether it's through those bribes or the one the one bite, or comparing to their sibling, or guilting or punishing. There's so many ways we put pressure on the kids. Sometimes it's even just that look.
Mhm.
And we know from lots of research that the more we pressure our kids to eat, unfortunately, the pickier they become, the less they weigh, the more they hate that specific food. And I
Mm.
think some of us could relate to this even as adults. If there's that one or two particular foods you don't like now because your parents just made you eat them as a child, that can carry on throughout your life as well. So we really want to take away as much of that pressure as we can, which takes away a lot of that battle and just makes dinner a more pleasant, relaxed place to come rather than having all those
Mhm.
hormones, stress hormones running. And we
Right.
can come to the table and make some of those positive memories as opposed to negative.
Yeah. So when you were just explaining this, I thought, oftentimes I think parents don't, and moms especially, they don't realize they're putting this pressure on their kids,
Mhm.
but they don't necessarily know what to do, right? They don't know a better approach. So what do you suggest as far as creating a little bit more peace at the dinner table? What approach would be taking?
Mhm. Well, I love Ellen Satter's division of responsibility in feeding. And we know that if parents are able to follow their roles in feeding and then trust their children to follow their roles in eating, the child will grow up to have a healthier relationship with food. There'll be less picky eating, less of those battles. So the parents' roles in feeding are when the child eats. For younger kids, obviously teens have a little more control over that, but we want it to be more regular meal and snack times as opposed to constantly nibbling on goldfish and and juice throughout the day
Right.
so that there's no appetite when they come to the table.
Right.
We're also responsible for where the child eats. So ideally at the table with family when possible, in a supportive seat with a footrest, which often gets missed for those little toddlers or preschoolers so that they're more comfortable and physically
Hmm.
supported to eat.
Oh, that's a good
When,
one.
where, yeah,
Yeah.
it often gets missed, but it's an easy one to fix, especially if your kid's running to and from the table during meals.
Hmm.
Often it's just not a comfortable chair.
Yeah.
And then our third role in feeding our kids is what the children are offered to eat. So I know you teach a lot about this as well, right? Just a variety of balanced foods. And we don't want to fall in the trap of becoming a short order cook.
Hmm.
Some kids, if they have autism, for example, they'll only eat three foods. Then, of course, you do have to cater to them a bit. But for most kids, we really easily fall into that short order cook trap and make them the separate meals because that's all they'll eat because they know they have that option that they can always get chicken fingers if they refuse their dinner. So I would
Hmm.
suggest just having at least one food on the table. If your child was hungry, they could eat, then you don't make a second meal. Maybe it's like even like rice or buns or cucumber, just something that's on the table that they can fill up with without having to make them a separate meal or without them having to go hungry. And then you followed your roles and you can just leave it on the table and then trust your child to follow theirs of if they eat it and how much they eat.
Okay, I have a lot of questions around this.
Mhm.
Okay, I love all of this. And I will just disclaimer, I have always been the mom who, not that I did all of this right, but I also have a speech pathology background and feeding therapy
Awesome.
background. So I do know a little bit more than I guess the average, as far as education goes. I will say I've always been very firm and I'm not making two meals. And I cannot tell you how many times moms and friends have said, I cannot believe you let your child go hungry. I've never, ever have I ever made multiple meals. And I have three kids and they're older now, but they all survived and they all ate and they've all eaten really well. And that's just what's been provided to them. I never did chicken nuggets and the whatever it was that they wanted. Of course, they want something like that,
Mhm.
but that's not what we were having for dinner. So I've always been a one meal cook. Um, so I'm very curious as to what you have to say about this for those that might be listening, thinking, okay, right, that sounds great, but how do I make this transition? Because I think that's what feels so hard of you want me to have this peaceful dinner table. Now you're telling me to only cook one meal. That doesn't sound peaceful.
Mhm. And it can be a big leap and it can be a big change for kids. But I find that kids adapt very quickly. So once they know that this is the rule and you're not going to back down from it, it'll probably be 2 or 3 days of
Mhm,
complaining. And then
mhm,
they just give up. They go, okay, well, I'm not going to get my chicken fingers, so I'm going to have some spaghetti. Maybe the sauce is on the side, maybe there's no sauce, but I'll eat something that mom put on the table for us. And if they're old enough to get them involved, you can take their preferences into account. Like maybe they can pick one night of the the week where they get to choose a meal, right? So as much as you can get them involved in picking out a new vegetable at the grocery store or creating the meal plan or cooking is awesome
Mm.
too. But I think once you set these boundaries, if you know what's going to work for your child, if they are just in this pattern of expecting this certain food, but physically they can eat family meals, once you set that boundary, then it really won't take too long
Yeah.
before they're used to the new rules.
Yeah, I would agree. And I don't have this experience with food, but I have this experience in other areas of uh, raising my kids where I had a child, one of our kids, will not name names, but one of our kids
Mhm.
had a really hard time staying in her bed when her dad was out of town when she was little. She wanted him. He traveled a lot. It was such a struggle for me to be there with her. And she wanted him. So she would get out of her bed. She would go to the door. She would scream, course, the other kids trying to go to sleep, the whole deal. And so I would pick her up, put her in bed, and all my training would say, don't look at her, don't talk to her, just pick her up, put her in bed, tuck her in. And I did that over and over and over,
Mhm.
probably for 2 hours,
Mhm.
for a few nights, but every night it was less time. Every night
Mhm.
it was a little bit easier. And so I share that for anybody who is thinking, oh my gosh, what is this going to look like for me if I make this transition? Because
Mhm.
it is difficult. It feels really hard when you're in the middle of it, but it's short-lived. And if I look back on that time with one of my kids, I think, wow, if I hadn't have done that, what would our life look like now? Or how long would this have gone on? And it was short-lived. Feels long at the
Yes.
time, but short-lived when you
Yes.
look at the span of it.
So
Um,
worth it.
yeah, for sure. And I also love that you said get them involved. I, again, 100% agree with this. I will say this to our listeners. So when my kids were little, they ate what I cooked. They didn't always love it. And they didn't always eat the vegetable that I cooked. Like you said,
Mhm.
they saw something on their plate that they liked, they'd eat that first, and they might pick at something they didn't really prefer. And they still do. I have two teenage daughters, and sometimes I make things they don't really love. When you have three kids in your house, it is hard to find all the meals that everybody loves. But getting them involved was really impactful when they were little because everybody had a meal they could choose. They could choose something, maybe not the whole meal. They could choose what the vegetable was, what the meat was, whatever it was that we are having. And then we put it on a board so everybody visually could see once they could read, they could see what was on the meal plan so they could have a heads up and love it or not love it, but they all could see what was happening. So that was very impactful for our family. So I just wanted to share that since you were talking about involving them, which I think is a great tip.
Yes, and you were talking earlier on about teaching your kids about food, and that's one of the best ways to learn about food is going through that whole process of maybe in the summer you get to go to the farmer's market and talk to a
Mm.
farmer about how carrots are grown, or pick out the fruit at the grocery store, prepare it, meal plan. Those are all hugely important life skills a lot of people are missing. So if you can ingrain those in your children and teach them about basically how to cook and about food, then that's going to be a very important life lesson for them too.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yes. I 100% agree with that one for sure. Okay, so we've basically what you've talked about is setting up an environment for our kids first and foremost, right? Having meal times, not allowing them to snack so that they are actually hungry. They're coming to the table. We have a good setup for them as far as a chair that they're sitting in, and then giving them, some options there to create a better dinner table experience. Would you say those are the main things if somebody is really looking to make these changes that they should work on?
I think so. And I would recommend that division of responsibility for all families, whether their child is picky or not, whether their child has special needs or not. I think it's a good basis for all families and will, work well or serve almost every child. Some do need a little extra support. As you would probably know, being a speech language pathologist or coming from feeding teams, sometimes we need to use extra strategies whether that's food chaining or food play. The Sequential Oral Sensory, or SOS program, was created by Dr. Kay Toomey, and it's all about positive play with food for kids who might be a little sensory sensitive. So just
Mhm.
getting them to explore these new foods, even if it's just being in the room with a new food or a new smell, to passing the bowl to a parent, to smelling it. All those are good steps for kids who are really picky or sensory sensitive towards eating. We think
Mhm.
it's just put it in your mouth, chew and swallow it, but for a lot of kids, there are many steps to get there.
Yes, yes, I love that you said that. I mean, I think that, the special needs feeding therapy is a different, realm and different approach.
Mhm.
But there's so much overlap too, in that eating is a sensory experience for all of us.
Mhm.
And so again, I think as parents, we're like, well, just eat, just eat the food, just try it, just put it in your mouth. Oftentimes for kids, it's about exploring the food. So touching it,
Mhm.
smelling it, and just having it on their plate. For some kids, especially those who haven't been exposed to a lot of the vegetables or have been eating chicken nuggets and French fries for multiple meals a week, just allowing it to be on their plate is quite a task for them. So I love that you said that, because I think as a parent, we can rush things along just because we're adults, and that's just kind of what we naturally do. But to allow our kids to just take in all the senses of a food that we eventually want them to try.
Yeah, absolutely. Eating is the most difficult sensory task we do. It involves all eight of our senses. So even for a child, if they don't like a specific food on their plate and they'd say yuck and run away from the table, sometimes even a learning plate will help. So they have a little plate to the side, can put a bean on the plate, and the bean can just stay there. Or if they want to tell you what color the bean is, great. If they want to pick it up and smell it, tell you what it smells like, great. They want to lick it, great, but it may just be okay to look at it during
Mm.
dinner and getting comfortable in it. These are just all ways of exposing kids to new foods and new smells and all of it.
Yes, yes. Yeah. So many different hierarchies that we can go through as far as, just exposing kids to some of those foods. So let's go back a little bit to meals, mealtime, and can you talk a little bit more about just the family meal in general? I feel like so many of us have kind of gotten away from family mealtime, and talk a little bit about the importance as a reminder to us as to why we should incorporate more of these into our week.
For sure. Family meals have huge positive effects on kids. Of course, it's a chance to connect, develop your child's taste for food by exposing them to all these family foods. But for the young kids, they actually learn a lot by watching those around them eat. And then for kids, adolescents, so for your kids, having regular family meals, which is generally defined as three or more a week, it doesn't have to be dinner, it can work for your family. But these kids not only have a more nutritious diet, but they do better in school. They have healthier relationships. They're less likely to be involved in risky activities like drugs and alcohol. And we know that family meals are more important to a child's self-esteem and confidence than things like their family's income level or, their family structure or religion. So it is something that if you can get in the habit of having somewhat regular family meals, it provides a huge, huge impact to your kids.
So yes, and I love all of this around family meals, and I agree that we should all be a little bit more consistent with them. I will say that we are not the best with family meals simply because my girls are competitive dancers. They get home at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, and they've been gone
Yeah.
all day, all day. They
Yeah.
leave at 7 a.m. and that's when they come back home. Not every day, but I mean, 3, 4 days a week. So we do the best we can with the time that we have. And so I think that was a mindset shift for me. And so if you're a mom listening and you're like, but we literally cannot sit down together, I feel that. But I think that that's part of like being consistent when you can, and the time that you do have, making that as impactful as you can for your kids as far as having those family meals. So I have a question though. Would you say that these family meals are helping our kids in so many different ways because of the social aspect, or what's the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, I think it's mostly due to the social aspect because you know that once you have teenagers, as I have some as well, especially boys, I feel like they don't talk to you. You never get a chance to talk to them. You don't see them. They're locked in their room or with their friends.
Mhm.
So I think it is just that kind of regular family time, even if it's not a meal, it doesn't have to be at home. Maybe you get out to a restaurant occasionally and everybody puts their phones away, right? So I think the big part of that is just the time to connect and the family time and that pleasant family time, right? So maybe we take the focus off of food and who's eating what and how much and just talk about your highs and lows from the day if you have younger
Mhm.
kids or what's going on in our lives. And that is yeah, the most impactful part for sure. It's not really
Mhm.
about the food.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. And my season with teenagers, it's finding what should we talk about today that is not going to be a trigger for
Hmm.
one of the kids. How was your day? That could definitely be a trigger for,
Hmm.
if one kid had a really good day and one kid had a bad day. So I have found that, we don't talk about food anymore because we're kind of beyond that with the kids,
Hmm.
but I do find that sometimes it's figuring out what it is that we can talk about that will be connection time or that won't feel strained, if that makes sense, just because we have teenagers.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of strain. I get it.
Right, right. Yeah, I agree. So, all right, if we're not, and we have listeners that are like, we're not doing family meals, could you give us some tips as to like how to kind of start implementing more of these family meals?
Yeah, I think if it's not something you're used to doing, maybe even just start with once a week. And maybe everybody's at home Sunday for brunch, for example. So a time of the week that generally everybody's home. Um, and you just say, hey guys, we're going to eat together, like every Sunday at 11. So I'm going to wake you up at 10:45 and
Mhm.
I'm going to make you French toast and berries. And we're just going to sit down for 10 minutes. And you can have a set time, right? If they don't want to eat, fine. If they're not hungry, they don't like breakfast, fine. But you can just sit for 10 minutes. If you have younger kids, I printed out a bunch of conversation starters and put them in a cup, and everybody gets to pick one. Actually, my older
Mhm.
kids even like this. Like, if you were to pick any superpower, what would it be?
Mhm.
Or something silly like that, right? Just to get
Mhm.
everybody kind of laughing and talking and having fun.
Yeah, I love that. So we have these little cards. I think they're called table talk cards,
Oh,
and that's
awesome.
the purpose of them. So
Mhm.
I don't do this myself. I just purchased them. So I just bought them. I don't know, Amazon or something. But I thought this would be good. I don't have to guide the conversation. Somebody else or something else can guide the conversation. And my 11-year-old son was all about it. Let's do a conversation starter. And
Yes.
sometimes my teenage daughters are on board. Sometimes they roll their eyes like, oh. So again,
Hmm.
having options. I think that at our point in life, it's a good thing to have those options of, okay, we can use this. All right, you guys don't want to do that today? Okay, we'll talk about something else.
Hmm.
And I love that you mentioned it doesn't have to be dinner. I think we bucket family time into dinner often, like, well, we can't sit down and have dinner. And that's what I was saying earlier. My kids don't get home until 9 o'clock at night. So we are better about being intentional at breakfast. My husband makes breakfast for the kids every single morning before they go to school. And we at least have that time. It's sometimes just 5 or 10
Awesome.
minutes,
Yeah,
before
that
they
counts.
they come down, they're eating, we are all there together.
It's
So
great.
I love that you said that because don't put it in a box of it has to be dinner, it has to be nighttime. It could be any
Hmm.
meal during the week. Um,
Hmm.
and I also love that you said, just to make it, oh, hey, we do this every Sunday at this time, and I'm a calendar girl. So we have a family shared calendar, whatever's on that family shared calendar, everybody's doing. So you better show up.
Perfect. They'll know, no excuses.
That's right. That's right. Jennifer, these are fabulous tips. We talked about some picky eating. We talked about making peace at the dinner table, especially with younger kids, setting up that environment for kids. We talked about strategies to just have them have food on their plate with others, taking that focus off the food. Oh my gosh, like so many takeaways. I'm like listing all my takeaways right now. Making family meals a little more social, getting the kids involved. Is there anything that we missed today?
I mean, there's so much to talk about, right? And I feel like I've written 2,000 word blogs on all of these.
Yeah.
So, people are welcome to jump over to my website and check that out or send me a DM on Instagram. And I love to hear from people and their questions and yeah, what they're
Perfect.
struggling with and how I can help.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us where we can find you.
Sure. So my website is just firststepnutrition.com. And I have a blog there and a tab with some freebies. And on Instagram, I'm at First Step Nut.
Fabulous. And we will
Nutrition
leave.
was too long.
I hear you. So we will leave all of those links in the show notes so that you can contact Jennifer if you have more questions or you have specific situations with your family or your kids, and she will be happy to help you. Jennifer, thank you so very much for your time today. We appreciate all your wisdom and look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, Sarah.